Welcome to the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. I'm here with Eric, I'm Pastor Clay, and we're here to discuss the last week before the season of Lent, or Transfiguration Sunday. This story from Mark's Gospel, where we are met with Jesus and three of his disciples on a mountaintop, and then two figures from Israel's history appear alongside of them.
So Transfiguration. This was a really interesting story.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know that I'd have heard it, or but I've read through the Gospels. Like,
right.
I don't remember it.
Yeah. Certain things hit us differently at different times. That's absolutely true.
I was intrigued the whole time. I mean, I had to tell Everett to stop talking, but
Happens.
it was, I don't know, it was really interesting.
Good.
So, okay, who's Elijah? And maybe this is a stupid question, but why was it, I mean, because I get Moses. Why Elijah too?
Yeah. Elijah was a prophet. He does not have a book of prophecy in the Bible, but yet he was a major prophet. He was he did some really important stuff. The prophets of Baal, the story of the prophets of Baal, calling down fire from heaven, that was Elijah.
Okay.
Elijah predicted a famine in the land of King Ahab, and his wife Jezebel got super pissed about it because he was right. They were trying to. He is seen as one of the greatest prophets in Israel's history, and so that's why Elijah, and that's why he would be the one to represent the prophets on the Mount of Transfiguration.
Sure.
Yep.
Because you're reading this in the Bible, and I get Moses, that makes perfect sense,
right? Yep.
I'm like, who's this guy? I mean, it's kind of the mentality I had. I'm like,
yeah, for sure.
Why is he here?
For sure.
But then when you talked about, and all of a sudden Moses and Elijah are gone, and Jesus is still there, that really clicked for me. That no, he's bigger than them.
Yeah.
And it's a whole.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of where, to me, and this is just me in my thinking, it's kind of where Judaism and Christianity kind of have the switch, where that moment in time, Judaism kind of disregards that.
Right.
Where we kind of look at that. I mean, that's a big step.
It is.
That's a huge step.
It
even
absolutely
before
is.
The Passion, or even, besides the two big stories that we always talk about. This is huge.
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole time I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, things just click for you at different times. So here's a question for you.
Yeah.
And so in verse 9, God says that, or Jesus says that we have to wait, or that Peter and the other two, because it was James and John, right?
Yep.
That they have to wait until after he's risen to share with everyone else what just happened.
Yes.
Why does he say that?
That is a major theme in the Gospels, especially Mark's Gospel. It's called the Messianic Secret, where there's a lot of stuff that happens that Jesus says, "Don't tell anybody until after this." A healing takes place, and then the last verse will be, "And Jesus told him to tell nobody." So there's a couple schools of thought. Is that Jesus was really intending for no one to know, to kind of have that not just an air of mystery for the sake of mystery, but to have the cross be even more of a potent moment. Because in the Gospels, the first time that there's a profession of faith that is not silenced, it's at the foot of the cross when the centurion says, "Surely this was the Son of God." That's the first time in the gospel there isn't something major that happens because Jesus can't say that then because he's dead, and so it's building to that moment of climax at the cross. There's also the other explanation is the purple monkeys problem, where if I tell you not to think about a purple monkey, what's the first thing that you think about?
Sure.
And by saying, "Hey, don't tell anybody this," what Jesus knows human nature, that we're going to go and tell.
Sure.
And that we're going to go and tell and even be a little bit more proud of how we're telling because we were told not to.
How do you not tell?
I know, right?
Like the whole moment with the bright light and the being on top of this mountain, like,
Right.
like how do you not tell people?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's just crazy.
Yep. And for the 12 to be as close as they are, to have the 3 experience this and not tell, I mean, there's no way
No,
that they didn't go back and say, hey, y'all, you're not going to believe what we just saw.
sure.
There's no way they're not going to talk about it. Mm-hmm.
So, and then, okay, back to why. Like, okay, I get Peter.
Uh-huh.
You know, Peter's always a focal point.
Right.
Why James and John?
Yeah, that's a great question. For especially for John specifically, and James and John are brothers. They're the sons of Zebedee, also known as the sons of thunder, which is really fun. That's their nickname among the disciples.
That is kind of fun.
Especially in John's gospel, we hear we hear a disciple referred to as the beloved disciple, and that's John. John is the beloved disciple. Jesus and John were close, such that he's going to share this moment with this disciple that he loves. And then James, I don't really have a good answer for that. I can just only imagine that it's because they're brothers. Mm-hmm. But on the same token, Peter and Andrew are brothers too, and it's just Peter. Mm-hmm. It's not Peter and Andrew and James and John, the brothers. It is Peter, the leader, the one that Jesus has just said, you are the rock, and upon this rock I'll build my church. Mm-hmm. And then James and John, the sons. I really don't have a good answer as to why James, but for John, it's because he's the beloved disciple. He and Jesus are close. Mm-hmm. When Mary Magdalene comes and tells, in John's gospel, when Mary Magdalene comes and tells the disciples about the resurrection, Peter and John take off. They take off running because John has this level of compassion for Jesus that he wants to see what's going on, and Peter's the leader, so of course he's going to go too. Mm-hmm. And so that is why that's why those two are present at the Transfiguration.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, because Peter makes sense because of
Yep.
he's the leader, but I've always wondered, or at least when I was listening, I was wondering.
Yep.
But then you say 6 days later is when he starts preaching about the Passion.
Well, it was 6 days after the first time he taught about the Passion.
Okay.
So because the start of teaching about the Passion is wrapped up in the realization that Jesus is the Messiah in the Great Confession. This happens right before it, and so 6 days after this, after he's just asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" He takes them up on a mountain and shows them exactly who he is. Like, there is no denying that Jesus is the literal Son of God because of this transfiguration moment.
That is insane. Mm-hmm. I mean, the mental picture of that.
Yeah.
Like, you could not put what I picture. You could not put that into a movie because of how powerful that would be.
Right.
Like, okay, so then Moses and Elijah are gone. And the clouds come in, and then God speaks.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine what that was like?
Nope.
Like, that's insane.
Nope. Yeah.
And it almost felt like, when God says listen, it almost felt like, for crap's sake, would you just listen this time?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like what more do I need to tell you that this guy is important? Mm-hmm.
And that's what it felt like when you were reading that.
Yeah.
It was just like, you need to stop thinking and start listening. Mm-hmm. And no, you don't need to go build 3 huts because we don't belong up here. You belong down there teaching this to everyone else, in the way of Jesus.
Right.
At least that's how I felt when I listened to that.
Absolutely.
And it's just like, and they finally get it. Mm-hmm. But I just felt, reading that, I just felt God's frustration of, well, holy crap, for the last time, listen to what I'm saying. Yeah. And
yeah, this is the second time the voice of God is literally spoken in the gospel, saying that this is the Son, this is the beloved one. Mm-hmm. Listen to him. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is so crazy. Mm-hmm. To have that moment, to be there, I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, me neither. It's really, it's dramatic and it's bright, and it's definitely they definitely know that something's going on.
So they come back down, and they saw someone on the road.
Yeah.
What was that part again?
The immediately, so in Mark's gospel, Mark loves the word immediately. Like the most used word, the most used phrase in Mark's gospel is "and immediately." Everything happens really fast in Mark's gospel. It is the action story of the Bible. As they're coming down from the mountain, immediately they are confronted by someone who is seeking the healing of their son. That their son is ill, and they are immediately forced into a situation where they have to watch Jesus do the things that Jesus does, and perform a healing. So they don't get even a moment of, "Woof, what was this thing?" They don't get a moment to process, because they're just thrust back into the work of ministry that they've been about thus far. So
I suppose Jesus would have been coming down the mountain with them too.
yes, yep,
It was the 4 of them, not just the 3 of them.
yep.
So that aha moment for us, that for crap's sake moment for us, what was it? Which one? Okay, so you talked about St. Benny's and that experience. What else has there been for you?
Oh, there have been so many different things. Just when I was thinking about going to seminary, I was really wrestling with my call. I was cutting a field of alfalfa, and I don't like having to drive all the way back to the pickup with empty. Basically, I don't have to without cutting. And so I said, "Hey God, if you really want this, if this is really your will for my life, this field's going to end close to the pickup." I demanded a sign from God in the moment. I know you're not supposed to do that, and that's not how God works. But I was just I am wrestling with this. I need to make a decision. There has to be, it really has to come down to it right now. If I'm really going to pursue ministry and uproot my entire life from going to school in Aberdeen and being a music major and having the circle of friends and blah, 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 including, my wife, not at the time, but eventually, I really needed something tangible and something really to just know that this wasn't just Clay's random flight of fancy. This really was the will of God. And so I just said, if you really want me to go to seminary, this field's going to end on a good row. And lo and behold, it was
Swather width wide.
Exactly.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's the dumbest story I ever tell, but it literally happened.
But I get that though. I mean,
Yeah.
growing up on the farm and still farming,
Yep.
there is something about as the sun is setting and you're making the last pass with a combine, and you're ready to go dump, and just the beautiful sunset through the dust, you've got a full, and there's just something about it, the feeling that you get of knowing, and it's not windy,
right?
It's just peaceful out. There's just something about that.
Oh yeah.
That beauty just sets itself apart from
Absolutely
other stuff.
Absolutely.
And you just know that there's something else to this life than just combining corn.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was going to say there was one Easter service actually sticks out. And I think it was, it was here. It was here, and Jenna's parents came for some reason. And we were sitting here, and my grandpa Stearns. It was fantastic. There was music. I mean, it was just a moving service. And afterwards, you just left with this sense of that really meant something. That God was in this building, and it didn't have to be lights and sound and all that. I mean, you could just tell there was something different. Actually, the one of the pieces that sticks out to me is that Colton Laubach brought in a lamb and put it on the communion table.
Oh, okay.
And Steve had a big butcher knife, and for children's time was gonna chop its head off, because that's what we did on Good Friday. And you should have seen the kids just, oh no,
my gosh,
man, it was fantastic.
So
but that sticks out to me from that service too. But
that's so great.
But it was so cool. And then afterwards, Grandma and Grandpa came up to Jenna's parents and were like, "This happens every Sunday. You need to come back every." But no, that service just has always stuck out to me. Or another one too is sitting at Lake Ponce around the campfire at church camp.
Yes.
And the lake is calm, and
Yep.
If you don't feel something during that moment, you're just
Oh,
heartless at that
absolutely.
point. I mean, it just
Absolutely. There is nothing like a sunset at Ponset. There's nothing in the world that's like that.
glassy water and
Mm-hmm.
yep,
Yep.
that is always stuck out to me.
Yep.
How do we take that moment
Mm-hmm.
that's so easy to be a part of? Well, and like we talked about on Sunday, we got to come off that
Yeah.
and spread that to everyone else. Like, how do we get that done?
Right. I think that those moments fuel that for us. And that there's no story quite as powerful as our own story.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in college, I had a friend named Matt, and Matt is just one of the most amazing people I've ever met. He is just one of the nicest people I've ever met. He would give you the shirt off of his back, and he's just a amazing, amazing person. But he is not a person of faith. And what happened was one time I was in a practice room in Northern State, and I was working on something or whatever, and he comes into the room and he just says, Clay, you're weird. And I was like, well, yeah, thanks. We know
fine
this.
with that.
We know this. He's like, no, you're really weird. And I was like, okay, you're starting to get offensive. What's going on? What are you trying to say in this? He's just like, well, every Christian I know just can't wait to tell me about Jesus and really shove their religion down my throat and tell me I'm a bad person for not having not having a faith. And you're just not like that. And I was like, well, I am who I am, there's nothing else I can do other than be myself. And and he's just like, I really think that if you could convince me beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is all true, I think I would believe. And
Wow.
when you're presented with that kind of an opportunity, like my brain just went into overdrive, and I was like, look, I can't convince you. I mean, there is a step of faith involved in this, that we have to bank on the fact that we could be wrong. Like I believe that we're not, obviously, but and I just said the best thing that I can tell you to convince you of the existence of God is to just look at my life. I just shared some examples from my own life that have made me feel like there is a God, and that there is a God that loves us and cares for us no matter what. Like, I'm a child of adoption. I'm an adopted kid. Like the coolest stuff that happened in my life happened a month after I was born. I was born to a young couple in Sioux Falls. They tried it for a couple of weeks. They realized that this was not the right decision, and they put me up for adoption.
Really?
Yeah, so I was in foster care for 2 weeks. But meanwhile, in the background of all of this couple named Greg and Pat Lundberg and Gregory have been going through all of the process, all of the paperwork and all the background checks and all of the things that leads to a person being adopted. And so when the adoption agency called, they said, hey, we have a little boy for you. All the ducks were in a row. For me to be adopted. My cousin Todd had just finished law school. Like, I was one of the first things that he did in his legal career was representing my parents in my adoption case.
Really?
Like, that's just, I can't not believe in a God that works behind the scenes of what we're even aware of because of how my life started. And I can't not believe in a God that's all good, because I don't know what life would have been like had that not happened. So, like, I thank God every day that I have the life that I have, and I don't know what would have been different, but I don't have to know, because I am who I am. And that's all I can say, is that that mountaintop moment of being adopted. Even though I was a month old and didn't hear the story until I was much older, the full story. I mean, my parents were really cool about the fact that I don't have the memory of them sitting down and telling me that I'm adopted. It was just always been a fact of my life.
Sure.
But hearing the full story of how that all took place, like, it really points to a God out there that is just so much bigger than we can fathom. a God that shines on a mountaintop and brings characters back from an old, from the dead for a moment, to shine on a mountaintop with Jesus.
Right.
And so we use those mountaintop moments to fuel our testimony and to fuel the depth of our belief, so that we can go forth and share out of the strength of those memories, what we know of who Jesus is.
Getting back to, there is a step of faith in all of this. I mean, it's not cut and dry. It's not black and white. I mean,
Yeah.
but honestly, is anything?
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? For me, it's like we've talked about. I love historical context. I find that riveting, and like Jesus has been talked about forever,
Right.
but like the book of Isaiah talks about Jesus all the time. It doesn't say Jesus, but
Right. Yeah.
Bethlehem and all that kind of stuff. Like you can't tell me that book written 700 years before he was born is just because, like,
Right.
it's just a coincidence.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all.
And I just keep going back. Like, there's so much more to this than I think what even we realize now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's been present through all of this, and we just don't even know it.
Right.
It's just so cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So cool. Okay, so this Matt, we'll call him high functioning because he's a really good person and just doesn't. So how did you take that from there? I mean, did you have more experiences with him where you were able to kind of share?
Not particularly, no. I mean, we still hung out quite a bit. We were involved in a lot of the same stuff, and we just, his dorm room was cooler than mine, so we hung out there more
Sure.
often than not. But that never really came up again. And then I transferred schools, and
Sure.
so we're still friends on Facebook, and like I don't know what impact that had on him. I know what impact it had on me, but that's not that's not as important as the impact that it would have had on him. But that's also kind of not my job to know the impact. Like my job is to witness, and my job is to be the one that throws seeds out there. And if depending on how they're received, that's God's work. That's not necessarily my work to do.
Yeah,
Which
that's a really good point.
can be really frustrating, but also kind of exhilarating to know that that I, as this person that have had these experiences, is going to have an impact on someone's life that I won't even necessarily even know about.
Because, like, to me, reaching out to people who have, I don't want to sound disrespectful or anything, but have, obvious issues, in a way is almost easier to talk to them about the goodness of Jesus. So people who don't currently have
Right.
Jesus in their life and are having issues, it's almost
Right.
easier to talk to
Oh
them
yeah,
about it.
for sure.
Because I've got friends who don't either, maybe they do believe, but they don't really practice their faith, or don't believe, and it's harder to talk to them about it because they are doing really well,
Right.
from all societal, standpoints, they're a very successful person, but there's, in my mind, there's still a piece that's missing.
Yeah.
And how do you get through to a person like that? That's what I struggle with.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, when they feel self-sufficient and when life has been good to them, and it's really hard. It's really, really hard. I mean, people, they can be. I mean, my friend Matt's living a good and moral life apart from the reality of Jesus Christ, and I don't know that I can fault him for that. But I also do know that, like you said, there is a piece missing. Like, how much greater could it be if also he was a devout disciple of Jesus Christ? What difference could that make? I mean, what impact could that have? And just, that's the best thing that you can continue to do is to pray for him. I mean,
Right.
that's I know that that sounds glib and that sounds like a brush off answer, but the reality is that, at some point in time, life is going to change. And you just want to have that person so bathed in prayer that when that does happen, and and I'm not just saying that we have to have a tragic thing happen to them for them to believe in Jesus, but like there's going to be a time where things don't work. And how do they respond to that, and how do they react to that, with having no, real, foundation. And that can be scary for people. And so part of it, I mean, like I said, part of it is just to be in prayer for them and to, to lift them to Jesus every day and say, I don't know how you're going to work in their life, but I know that you can, and I know that you are, and so they're yours. There is a limited number of things that we can do at some point. That just it becomes God's problem and not ours.
Right. You wonder how much better could it be, and if they're an active follower of Jesus, who can that then reach?
Yeah.
We have this connection on this side of them.
Right.
On the other side,
Right.
The people we don't have a connection to.
Yep.
Who can they reach because of that?
Yep.
And that's something I struggle with all the time. Like, how do I get to this person? How do I get them here? How do I get them to be a part of something that's bigger? I feel like people are so, and society drives them this way, so self-centered.
Yeah.
I'm going to get what I need.
Yep.
And I'm not going to give a crap about what anyone else needs.
Right.
And that's probably part of our problem today, is that we don't think about anyone else. We just think about what's going on in our own lives.
Right.
And that's not what we're called to do.
No, not at all.
Yeah, we're called to take care of ourselves.
Right.
But then to go from there and
we're also called to bear one another's burdens. And that's Paul to the Galatians, that that our fellow person, regardless of who they are, that they matter. I mean, that's a central tenet of who we are. Like, we believe that we are made in the image of God, and that everyone shares that belovedness and shares that image. And so our call really is to be with, our call really is to be with them. And to support them in the midst of life, in the midst of good and bad and indifferent and everything in between.
Right.
So
this really gets to the core of even just kind of what we've been talking, like church growth and stuff like that. Like, how do we reach these people and get them in here to realize that, hey, there's something more you could have with this life, and there's so much more to this life.
Yep. We have to build relationships and earn the right to be heard in that way.
Yeah.
With Matt, if I wouldn't have been weird, that conversation would have happened.
Right.
Do I know what happened as a result of that conversation? Not necessarily, but the conversation happened.
Yep.
I was able to share my life and share my faith with him because he asked, because I was weird to him. Had I gone into his life and said, "Oh, hey, you're not a Christian. Well, you're probably going to hell, and you need to be a Christian," that conversation's not happening. Evangelism and church growth, like it has to be a relationship. It has to be relationally done, so that people see the value of something bigger. Especially in a world where we feel like we're the biggest thing and the brightest star. So.
Yeah. So, people don't want to be talked at. Like you said, you're going to hell if you're not a Christian. Like, it's almost like a person needs to realize that for themselves.
Right.
They don't want to hear that from someone else.
Yep.
They don't want to hear that, oh, you're a terrible person, or, oh, you're they just want a friend. And you don't need to talk down to them, because we're not any better than anyone else.
Oh, good Lord, no.
And that's what I always, like he said, you're weird because you're not acting like all the other Christians I've met. And that's just got to break your heart, doesn't it?
Yes.
To hear it that way.
Yep.
Because that's obviously not what we're called to do.
No, that is very much not.
That's just, that's hard. So what do we, so we've got, recording this Tuesday night, we have Ash Wednesday tomorrow.
Yes.
So I've always wanted to ask, what is the biblical context of Ash Wednesday?
Yeah. So, in the Old Testament, one of the ways that mourning was shown when it was to rend your clothing and to cover yourself in ashes. If you were mourning, not necessarily just the death of someone, but if you were mourning just really anything that went wrong or badly, the symbol of the fact that you were one that was mourning was that you would wear burlap, a lot of burlap clothing, and that you would cover yourself in ashes as a way of signifying that you're going through this mourning process. The real biblical background of it, especially what we do on Ash Wednesday, it comes from Ecclesiastes. That's where we get the phrase, you are dust and to dust you shall return, which is what I say when I make the sign of the cross on someone's forehead. Ash Wednesday is all about recognizing our frailty and recognizing our brokenness and recognizing the fact that we are in fact mortal and we are going to die. You have to face and confront that in very real ways on Ash Wednesday, and it's all about how we then prepare ourselves to participate in death with Jesus so that we can participate in new life with Jesus through the resurrection. So that's why we do Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is the beginning of the season of Lent, which is a much larger thing. And so kind of our focus is the fact that this past year has been hard, to say the least. We're going to focus really a lot on brokenness on Wednesday, just the fact that everything in our world has felt broken at some point in time in the last year, up to and including today when we've learned that our power grid is on the verge of a complete and total meltdown. So there's rolling blackouts throughout our entire nation so that our, people in Texas don't freeze to death. We're vulnerable. And that is kind of sometimes how God needs us to be so that God can work in our midst. And so that's gonna set us up for the rest of the season of Lent. We're going to focus on the healing stories in the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to focus on the fact that, yes, we are broken, but that's not the end of the story for us. Yes, we are damaged, but that's not the end of the story for us. Yes, we have infirmities and we have, we have, frailty, but that's not the end of the story for us because Jesus is the ultimate healer. And so we'll be building that theme throughout the rest of the season of Lent, building to, the ultimate redemption story, the ultimate healing story of Jesus being literally dead and then not anymore in the resurrection. So, yeah, that's where we're going with Ash Wednesday and the first week of Lent.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys want to join us tomorrow night, what time at Canton UMC at the church?
6:30 here at the church for Ash Wednesday services.
Very good.
Yep.
Well, thank you for joining us this week on the Cut for Time podcast, and join us again on Sunday morning at 10. Or later on, it'll be posted online. Otherwise, join us back here for the Cut for Time podcast next week.
Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.